To what extent this leadership team will be listening to the voice of the president-elect, soon-to-be president? How much daylight should we expect there to be between a Republican majority in the Senate and the White House?
Well, I think we have to look at the results of the election. The president really won quite handily in a mandate. And I think with that, we gained so that we are at 53 Republican senators, and the House is going to be Republican as well. So this is an opportunity that is rarely afforded the party that gets elected. And so I think we will be tied very closely to what President Trump told people on the campaign trail that he was going to do. Fix the border, work on inflation and make sure that affordability is what every family can have, an energy policy that makes sense, an international leader that's strong and gives the right messages around the world. This is what we expect, and so far I think that's what the president intends to do.
You mentioned energy policy, Senator. Just to drill down a little bit more specifically, we watched shares of some automakers fall pretty sharply today after Reuters reported what many expected, that Donald Trump plans to eliminate the $7,500 consumer tax credit for EVs, electric vehicle purchases. We spoke with a colleague of yours from the other chamber, Republican Congressman Andy Barr of Kentucky, on the early edition of Balance of Power. Here's what he had to say about it.
If you talk to auto dealers across this country, certainly in Kentucky, the demand for EVs is simply not there. And clearly, through the Inflation Reduction Act, Congress was trying to put its finger on the scale and have the government incentivize the allocation of capital, incentivize the transition to electric vehicles when, frankly, market demand is not there. This kind of industrial policy is not a good way to promote American competitiveness.
Now, what are your thoughts on this, Senator? And you probably saw this coming as well. We saw shares of Tesla go down, Rivian down, Ford down. Does Donald Trump have the votes? And would you support that move to make it happen?
I would support it. I don't think that the federal government should be incentivizing a certain product, and certainly EVs is what the Biden administration has been incentivizing. But I would even go a step further. There's been a policy to drive us to electric vehicles, but at the same time, in the bipartisan infrastructure package, which I voted for, there was money there to help with the infrastructure part, the recharging and all of that, and the government has failed in terms of deploying that. So there's really no infrastructure, and certainly in my area of West Virginia, rural areas, to even have electric vehicles be successfully used in many, many households. And so you see the car company, automotive manufacturers, they've ceased making certain models because the demand is not there. You can't force this. Besides the fact they're much more expensive, and a lot of places in this country, like my state of West Virginia, it'd be pretty tough on a very cold day to drive through those mountains very far in an electric car.
Well, right now, Senator, of course, you're not home in West Virginia. You are in the Capitol, and there is still some work for you and your colleagues to do in this session of Congress. There's government funding that needs to be figured out by year end. We heard from Congressman Barr that he does not think the can should be kicked down the road anymore, that these actual appropriation bills need to cross the finish line so that there can be a clean, fresh start when the new Congress sits and President Trump takes office. Is that likely to happen?
Well, we're working towards that. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, and I'm the ranking member on the Health, Labor, and Education Subcommittee. So it's a massive spending bill. I really think it's in President Trump's best interests, and I hope he sees it this way, to sort of clear the deck for him so that his priorities and his spending in line with the House and the Senate can be exhibited in a appropriations bill for the next year. I think it would make it a lot simpler and a lot easier. It is a lot to cram in at the end of the year, but this lays really honestly, I think, at the feet of Senator Chuck Schumer. We passed our bills in July out of committee in a bipartisan fashion, and he never put them on the floor. So if he had done that, we could have already worked through amendments and we could be further along in this process than we are. But I do believe we need to get it done by the end of the year. We also have a National Defense Authorization Bill, which sets our priorities in the defense space. We need to do that by the end of the year as well.
Another call for regular order, Senator. We hear you. You mentioned at the outset of the interview that it's time to follow the results of the election, and Donald Trump has been filling in the blanks fast and furiously over the past couple of days here in filling out a cabinet. It's going to be up to the Senate, of course, to provide the advice and consent on many of these names, including the likes of Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, including the likes of RFK Jr. For Health and Human Services. Will the Senate support these appointments?
Well, I think we're a long way from finding out the answer there. I do think that by and large, the president has the authority and the prerogative, and in an election such as this, the will to move forward with his own appointees that he thinks will put into action the promises that he made during the election. He was very specific. He says he wants a DOJ that's not weaponized. He wants a DOJ that's fair to everybody. And I think he feels, and many of us do, that he has not been treated fairly by our own DOJ. So, you know, he's put forward, I would say, somebody that he believes will make that right at the DOJ. But, you know, we have a process here. We have to go through committee. It has to go through the Judiciary Committee. Yeah. And so we're a long way from really seeing how this whole thing will end up in the end. But I think we should give due diligence to every single one of the president's appointees, and we should do it quickly. We should have it in place so that when he starts on January the 20th, he has a good possibility of filling out his cabinet rather quickly. Now, he's giving us names now. We can begin the vetting process.
Well, and that vetting process is, of course, one of the checks and balances that is embedded into the U.S. democratic system, Senator. And I wonder if you have concern about the potential removal of those checks if instead we get a bunch of recess appointments. What is leadership's view on that request from Donald Trump?
I mean, you know, my view, and I heard our new leader, John Thune, say this as well. Our mission is to fulfill our advise and consent role and do the confirmation process. So we can do it if we work, you know, around the clock and burn the hours that it takes to get these nominees in front of the full Senate. We can fulfill in the regular order way of confirming the nominees, and that's what we intend to do. I think all of this talk about recess appointments is way premature. I don't believe that's the direction that we want to go, and I don't think President Trump will want to go that. He wants the confirmation of the Senate because we're going to be working together all throughout these next several years, and we need to make sure that we not that we respect each other's roles, but that we have the confirmation from each other that we're moving in the right direction.